The Dream of Matter, the book I'm working on, is all about defining the soul mathematically and then quantifying it. It's about showing that the soul isn't just a poetic idea, it's a structure, a waveform. It's a system that we can understand. And more than that, the book is about mapping the bridge between that internal soul mind complex and our physical brain. But most people don't start with this kind of mathematics. We start with intuition, with a kind of a mystical feeling, that sense that the soul has to be real, but we don't quite know how to explain it. So while I was building out this project, a friend suggested you should check out Gary Zukav. And I thought, okay, that name sounds familiar from somewhere. And it turns out Zukav's a bit of a legend. I quickly read The Dancing Wooly Masters and The Seat of the Soul, which were both published, frankly, long before my own journey began, and I immediately got why people connected with his work. Now, he wasn't talking math, but he was doing something really profound. He made the invisible feel real. He brought quantum physics into the realm of wonder, and he gave readers language for the soul that was really rich with detail. And that's when I realized we're doing something similar, just from very different angles. Mysticism versus rationalism. So Gary Zukav walked us up to the edge of a new worldview, especially with the Dancing Wooly Masters. And what I want to do is help us walk through that threshold with clarity and, frankly, mathematical precision. Hi, if you're new here, I'm James. This channel is The Quantified Soul. It's where we explore the overlap between neuroscience, metaphysics, and a system called ontological mathematics. The goal is to understand what the soul really is, not just metaphorically, but structurally, to see how the logic of thought and the signal of the brain are actually part of the same system. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, welcome. Okay, so let's start with this. One of the things I loved in the Dancing Wooly Masters is how Gary Zukav treated physics, not as a cold mechanical subject, but as a kind of poetry. He explained how Wu Li can mean patterns of organic energy, and he linked it to this idea that physics is about form, not just about particles and predictions. And that really resonated with me, because when you look closely at it, I think the goal of science shouldn't just be to describe what happens. It should help us ask, why does anything happen at all? What is the structure of our becoming and of being? And now that's where science needs philosophy, metaphysics, logic, that structure I keep talking about. And that's exactly where ontological mathematics comes in. This system says the universe isn't made of stuff, it's made of thought, of frequency with structure. Reality is what must be true, not just what happens to be observed. And math? It's not just a tool we use, it is the very fabric of existence. Science is so successful using math to describe reality, frankly, because reality is mathematical, not because a man-made invention we call math can describe reality unreasonably well. So if Gary Zukav helped people feel that quantum physics was alive, then I think ontological mathematics can show us why it's alive. It gives that mystery a skeleton, a backbone even. Really, though, I think it goes as far as to resolve the mystery completely. Now, some people think that ruins the magic, but I think it deepens the magic. In fact, the greatest rationalist thinkers in history, Descartes, Leibniz, Hegel, they saw logic providing clarity as providing freedom, right? To see clearly, to understand things as they really are. Okay, let's talk about quantum mechanics for a second from the Dancing Wooly Masters. This is the stuff that frankly confuses even physicists. We've got observers, superpositions, probabilities. In his book, Gary Zukav brought quantum physics into the mainstream spiritual conversation. It wasn't just a science book, see, and that was a big deal. But most of the mystical interpretations that we have, frankly, I think they still leave us floating. They don't tell us what's actually there and what's happening. For example, the Copenhagen interpretation may as well be mystical. It says, don't ask what's real, just calculate the probabilities. Now, that's useful in a way, but it's kind of a philosophical cop-out, and it doesn't actually have a lot of explanatory power. And then from there, we get all of these half-true spiritual slogans like, we create reality by observing it. But what does that even mean? What is the observer? And again, that's hard to pin down. This whole thing is based on some major assumptions and also on interpretations. And many people don't even know that there's other interpretations to consider. In fact, funny story, I once met a successful quantum manifestation guru, and as we chatted at a party, I discovered that she didn't even know there were multiple interpretations. She thought quantum mechanics was Copenhagen. Now, there is a specific interpretation. There's many, but there is a specific one that I think takes ontology seriously, and I'd like to introduce here. It's called the de Broglie-Bohm interpretation, also known as pilot wave theory. And more or less, it says the particles are real, and so is the guiding wave that influences them. It's a particle and a wave. But mainstream physics doesn't like it because it relies on hidden variables. And since science can't measure them or verify them, we just discount this interpretation. But here's the twist. What if those hidden variables aren't physical, and so they're not hidden in the conventional sense? What if they're mental? When we invoke ontological mathematics and account for an immaterial soul exercising its free will, things we can't see, but we can reason about, this picture shifts dramatically. The wave function here isn't just a statistical abstraction. It's the mathematical signature of a shared mental field, a collective interference pattern projected by countless minds. It's not one soul's thought body, but it's really the externalized ripple of countless minds interacting in the same cosmic arena. So no, it's not your wave function collapsing. It's not a single soul's will steering the particle. It's the structured result of multiple wills, each broadcasting their thought frequency into the shared domain. And when we can't see the whole, it sure does look like randomness. But if we could grasp the total pattern, all the minds, each with their own will, all the frequencies, there would be no collapse, no indeterminism, no chance, just actualization, a coherent result born from infinite willful interference. Now, personally, I find the idea of all minds collectively dreaming reality into existence far more beautiful than the popular notion of an individual mind manifesting its personal desires out of some vacuum of randomness. The idea that you observe a particle and you collapse the wave function, that reality bends to individual will in isolation, I feel like it flattens the mystery. It turns the universe into a vending machine and the soul into a customer. But when we understand manifestation as co-creation, a tapestry woven from the interference of infinite minds and infinite frequencies, each mind and will contributing to the final image, I think that's really beautiful. We're composing the cosmos together, not individually. Okay, quick sidebar. Let's talk about that interference, because this is crucial for what comes next. When two mathematical waves meet, what happens depends on phase. Phase is the difference in starting conditions from each wave. In this example, you can see that these two waves have the same frequency and amplitude, but one starts later. That's called a phase shift or offset. When they combine, if their peaks line up, they're in phase, and they amplify. That's called constructive interference. But if they're out of sync, they can cancel each other out. That's destructive interference. But most of the time, frankly, it's somewhere in between. And what you get is an interference pattern, a structured result from overlapping waves. Ontological mathematics tells us that every soul is a complex waveform, a bundle of sinusoidal frequencies. The self, then, is the interference pattern that your frequencies create. It's not a metaphor. It's literally your thought structure, or maybe I'll coin the term thought body. Imagine that constructive and destructive diagram from earlier, but now try to imagine infinite frequencies unfolding across 6 dimensions in countless combinations. It seems pretty incomprehensible, but really, if we kind of work out the details this way, we might not be able to ever see it with an instrument or visualize it even with our mind's eye, but we can still understand it and how it works conceptually and mathematically. Now, the next step. Consider when the thinking of individual souls begins to interact with each other. This produces a collective interference pattern, which really underpins our entire physical universe. So that's these interference patterns that I'm talking about. So keep that in mind, or we'll refer to that in the following sections. Now, let's shift over to talk about love. Gary Zukav eloquently described it as an alignment of personality with the soul. And I think that's beautiful, like this alignment, and I think it's totally right. But I also think we can add more clarity here. Love, structurally, can be thought of as phase alignment and resonance between minds. It's when your waveform and someone else's come into, well, typically constructive resonance, but resonance nonetheless. Sometimes it feels like clarity, like peace. Sometimes it feels like electricity. I'm sure we've all felt that. But underneath all of it, it's just waveform compatibility and resonance. And even when we fall in love, very often we go out of our way to nurture and deepen this alignment. Think about it. The shared language that emerges, shared rhythms in our day-to-day life, investment in just understanding each other, all of this deepens the resonance. And here's an interesting part. Sometimes that resonance doesn't just amplify your strengths, it balances out your distortions. And that's why some relationships feel healing. They literally help stabilize your waveform. Of course, it can also explain why some relationships become codependent. We need the balance that our partner provides to feel whole. So love has a language, and I think we can borrow from some linguistics terms to help understand it. The waveforms that come into resonance, that's syntax. It's just mathematical syntax. The feeling or context of the love, that's the semantics. Syntax is what it's made of. The semantics is kind of how it feels. Now, the Greeks understood this. They gave us different types of love, like eros and philia and storge and agape. These different types of love all have the same structural logic, the same syntax, but different context. And so a different semantics, different experience. And don't forget unconditional love. And this one's tricky. Like it's impractical to try to conjure up the feeling or semantics of love as you think it should feel for something or someone that you really don't feel that way about. And in fact, I think that that's probably asking for trouble if we try to do that. But when we consider this language of love, we might say that unconditional love is just a waveform that holds its phase or can get into phase with another no matter what. It doesn't scatter under pressure. It remains coherent even in the face of distortions. We can always try to understand regardless of the situation. I think that's what considering the syntax and semantics of love, unconditional love, is pointing us towards. Now, Zukav also talks about karma, and he talks about it in a nice non-moral way as being about spiritual feedback, action and intention shaping experience. But again, I think we can go deeper. In ontological mathematics, the idea of karma really boils down, again, to wave mechanics. And the thing is, it's collective, not just individual. Every soul broadcasts its signal into a shared mental field. Let's call it the unus mundus, as Carl Jung did. And that field is full of interference. You're not vibrating in isolation. You're always influencing and being influenced by the collective. So when your waveform is incoherent, you create turbulence. And you feel that turbulence return. It's not punishment. It's just sort of this recursive effect, right, of participating in this collective interference pattern. And sometimes the interference you feel isn't even yours. It didn't come from you. You might just be tuned into a dissonant collective field, like ancestral trauma, cultural distortion, global fear. We can consider that karma too, but it's shared. And when we heal, we don't just heal ourselves, we offer the whole field, the whole interference pattern, a new harmonic to entrain to. And that's how transformation spreads. And I think that's really cool. Now, a quick footnote here, though, that the resources on ontological mathematics tend to avoid using the term karma, largely due to its moral connotations. But here we're using the term more loosely. So look, teachers like Gary Zukav have helped open the door. Zukav helped bring sacred language into scientific conversations. He showed that wonder matters. And now I think we're ready for the next step. Some people think that we need the mystery, that if we had certain knowledge, then we would lose our sense of awe. But personally, I found that real knowledge is even more beautiful than mystery and even more awesome. So here's where it all points. Because this isn't just philosophy, it's not just science or mysticism. I think we have a blueprint here. If the soul is real, and I suggest there's logical evidence that it is, then it must be lawful, structured, intelligible. Not a ghost, not a metaphor, but a signal, like a waveform. And that means something extraordinary. We can potentially quantify it. Not reduce it, not trap it in a spreadsheet, but reveal it, model it, tune it. The same way we would map a melody, a constellation, or a genome. Imagine that. Imagine if we could actually detect the distortions in an individual soul pattern, not metaphorically, but in data, in signal. Imagine being able to guide healing based on the precise places where thinking has broken down. Not a guess, not a feeling, an actual diagnosis of the soul's signal. You can't manage what you don't measure, systems thinkers say. Well, what if we could measure the soul? We would finally stop treating suffering as random, growth as vague, and spirit as a mystery we have to believe in. We finally begin to operationalize the highest parts of ourselves, to create a spiritual science that doesn't ask for faith, but actually gives us knowledge and understanding. This is the next step. The soul is real. Now it's time to make it knowable. And frankly, I think that has the potential to change everything. Now, I know I have some listeners who take a really hardline approach to reason. They might be thinking, Zukav's approach isn't just incomplete, it's wrong. It's still rooted in mysticism. It's not mathematically grounded. It leads people to the wrong direction. Okay, look, I get it, but I think your thinking is short-sighted. Ontological mathematics is certainly the gold standard here. It's the only system I found that actually delivers a complete rationalist framework, and that's not about feelings, metaphors, and intuition. It's all about logic, structure, and necessity. But here's the thing. Not everybody walks in the door of reality through pure mathematics. Most of us start with wonder, with curiosity, with bright eyes, with stories. And honestly, that's okay. Because if our goal is coherence, not just personally, but collectively, then part of the mission is translation. We need bridges. And Gary Zukav's work, it's a bridge. It's a great bridge. It helped bring people into contact with deeper questions. And for a lot of us, that's where the journey had to begin. So no, mysticism doesn't give us all the answers, but I think it points us towards the mystery, and that's a start. What we're doing now is giving that mystery a language and using that language, mathematics, to demystify it all. Okay, thanks for listening. Really, if you've made it this far, it means you're not just curious. You're committed to understanding reality and the soul more deeply. And that's what this channel is all about. Exploring reality and consciousness, not just through metaphor, but through structure, through mathematics, through systems that actually explain the soul, the mind, and the bridge between them. So if this resonated, please subscribe. There's much more to come. Videos that blend neuroscience, metaphysics, and this hidden architecture we are revealing behind our lives. If you want to go deeper, check out my Substack, The Dream of Matter. It's where I unpack some of these ideas in longer written form. And if you're ready to apply these ideas in your life, like if you're struggling with focus, mood, or you just know your signal is scattered, check out Peak Mind. That's my neurotherapy practice where I help people not just cope, but tune their mental waveform to help overcome these symptoms. Because the soul may be eternal, but its signal can still be strengthened. Thanks again for watching.